Welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast. This episode is presented by Mental Health America of Wisconsin. We're your co-hosts, Terri
and Bridget.
Each week, through intimate, candid conversations with guests, we explore the different perspectives on and experiences of depression. We keep it real because the illness is real. We keep it hopeful because there truly is hope in spite of what depression tells you.
We're not experts or therapists. We're sisters and best friends who live with depression and have interviewed hundreds of others who do as well. By sharing personal experiences, we can all learn from each other that while depression convinces us that we're utterly alone, that our best days are in the past, and that we won't experience joy or hope again, those thoughts are symptoms, not truths. Hearing others shamelessly discuss their mental health journeys provides information, connection, and hope, taking away some of depression's power.
Hello, Bridget.
Hello, Terri. Just like about every other aspect of our lives, our podcast schedule got kind of wonky during this pandemic. We still produced an episode each week, but we just realized that we forgot to pause after 9 episodes for a season in review.
So today's episode will be a brief recap of the last dozen episodes. If the description or snippet from one or more of them interests you, please go into the archives and listen to the full episode. There are more than 200 to choose from.
We begin our review with episode 163, Breath as a Mental Health Management Tool. The list of things that feel or are out of control can be long. But for most of us, breath is something we can access anytime, and breathing consciously is a quick, free, and effective form of meditation.
That's what I found is the best thing for people in moments that they're in the depths of it. Just being able to be there, and then in the appropriate time to be able to offer advice, to be able to refer on. But yeah, you definitely don't want to should people and think this is a magic pill, because it's not. It takes practice, and it also takes individualization for what you're going through and what you need.
Our guest for this episode, Ambrose W.B., joined us for a casual, honest, and potentially healing conversation about taking and keeping control during challenging times. Again, this is episode 163, Breath as a Mental Health Management Tool.
Episode 164, Talking About Depression Like It's Common, because it is, features one of the most unvarnished, unstigmatized discussions we've had to date. Our guest, a rapper and comedian, Zane Thomas, tackles everything from helping a suicidal friend to how substance use has impacted his mental health, and how talking back to depression can help us separate from the thoughts which, well, in our own heads and own voices, are actually depression's messaging.
Wait, what? You're gonna tell me the same thing that you told me last time? Oh, that's real original. Because here's the thing. I feel like if it was somebody else talking about one of your friends, you wouldn't put up with that. You'd be like, I love that person. They're amazing. Don't talk about my friend like that. But when it's us in our head, it's so easy to just, oh, well, I thought it, so it must be true. You know, we don't really challenge the voices in our head.
In this 20-minute episode, Zane talks about depression and suicidal thoughts like they're common, because for many of us, they are. That full episode is number 164.
Next was episode 165, The Year in Review from a Mental Health Perspective. 2020 challenged us all on many levels, including economic, political, social justice, overall health, and mental health. Our guest, licensed psychologist R. Kwaku Smith, says in an overwhelming environment, people tend to respond in different ways.
We can tread water and just barely maintain. We could be an example and be an extraordinary example by going above and beyond, saying, hey, I thrive in this type of madness. In fact, this brings out my creative juices. I see a problem and I solve it. Unfortunately, that's not the great majority of people. So the majority of people will tread, but unfortunately, another large majority of people will start to sink.
This full episode is number 165. focuses on what we can do to maintain or restore our mental health as we try to recover and move on from the pandemic and other challenges of this past year.
In episode 166, Holding On to Hope, a holistic therapist addresses the need for and importance of hope and offers some of the advice she gives her own clients.
And so we talk about things like passion. What is there anything that makes you feel a moment of release? Is there anything that makes you feel excited to be around? And sometimes that can be hard to come by, and so we sit and we experience that together. We don't pretend, right? So if someone's having a hard time coming up with something, we really think about, okay, what's your purpose and why are you here?
Therapist Lauren Bittner, who has extensive experience treating anxiety and depression, acknowledges while that can be a hard question to answer at times, that doesn't mean there's not a good answer. Episode 166, Holding On to Hope, is a compassionate and realistic conversation about the challenges of being human in 2021. The full episode is 23 minutes long.
One of depression's most insidious characteristics is its intent to convince us that we don't have it, that our dark thoughts, loss of energy, and inability to experience joy are personal characteristics and failings versus symptoms, that we are just too weak to handle life the way others are able to. In episode 167, we push back with our guest, Michael Landsberg.
You don't always know that you have this terrible illness because it happens so slowly and because we often deny ourselves the diagnosis, which is, hey, I'm sick, because we like to, and this is a weird human characteristic, beat ourselves up. So it's like, oh, this is my fault. And oh my gosh, I can't believe I let this happen to me.
Episode 167, Depression, a sickness, not a weakness, is just 17 minutes long and features a candid, spirited discussion about our shared experiences and battles with depression, making the critical distinction between being sick and being weak.
Landsberg's energy and comfort discussing his experience of depression was so unique that we produced a second episode with him, number 168, A Conversation About Antidepressants. In it, he makes clear he does not like being on meds. He does not like their side effects either, but he hates his depression more.
People will deny themselves the access to medication because they don't believe in it. And they say those words without really knowing what the hell they're saying. They just have heard it before. I don't believe in medication. Really? What don't you believe in? It's not like we're not talking about God here. We're talking about this pill that you take that might, 60% chance, make you better and give you your life back. Well, I'm worried it's going to change me. And it's like, it will change you. Right. But if you're sick enough, first of all, you want change. But second of all, the changes that it makes in you that you don't like are worthwhile.
It may sound like he's advocating for meds, but he's actually not. The point Landsberg's making is simply to not take anything off the table that might help us treat our depression because of stigma or bad information. That full episode is number 168, and it's about 18 minutes long.
Our next episode this season is called The Power of Shared Stories in Fighting Stigma. In it, we speak with Dr. Patrick Corrigan, one of the world's leading researchers of the stigma of mental health. He says research proves the most effective way to get people to understand that mental illnesses are real and not a choice is by speaking openly and shamelessly about what's going on in our minds and bodies, when and where it feels safe to do so.
So I go around the world presenting this program, and what I'm constantly amazed at is the number of people in the audience who say, I'm just sick and tired of having to keep it a secret. It's who I am, I'm not bad, I'm not dirty, I didn't choose this. And so I think for a lot of people, the benefits of coming out is just being able to be authentic.
Dr. Corrigan says other benefits of being shame-free about our mental health are starting discussions with open eyes and minds and show versus educate people that those of us living with mental health challenges are as competent, able, and empowered as everyone else. This full episode, The Power of Shared Stories in Fighting Stigma, is just 15 minutes long.
The next 2 episodes expanded on that discussion. Number 170, Stigma is Real, and 171, Life Would Be Better and Safer Without Stigma, feature quotes from a number of former guests. They share how the stigma of mental illness is a factor in their lives, and that because people are judged and or fear being judged for having symptoms or diagnoses of mental health challenges, can defer a lot of us from seeking help or treatment.
Despite my mom being a therapist, it took until me being in a pretty suicidal place before my family was like, oh, hey, maybe like you should go to therapy and maybe we should address this.
So I think if in that first month or so, I would have gotten the information and sort of kind of the permission to go get the correct help, I have a feeling I wouldn't have sunk so deep into this.
It's hard to ask for a recommendation for a therapist or a recommendation for a psychiatrist, but why? When we need a dentist, we ask our colleague or we ask our neighbor.
When it comes to seeking help, I suddenly feel weak or that I can't handle my illness.
Because you think other people see it that way.
Exactly.
I would like to be a part of a movement to make it not that way, because I look at the statistics of especially a lot of young people who take their own life, who didn't seek any sort of help. And I think that those types of terrible events could have been avoided if we just lived in a society where talking about mental illness was on par in the same tone of talking about a physical illness.
Those episodes 170 and 171 are both about 15 minutes each if you'd like to check them out.
Next is episode 172, The Value of Tracking Our Mental Health Symptoms. Tracking your mental health symptoms in writing or with an app can give us an objective, quantifiable way to recognize changes in our mental health before we might otherwise recognize them. And the information could help professionals and other members of our support team as well.
The other thing that tracking symptoms can do is it can alert your doctor if there's an issue with your medication. Because sometimes with bipolar, you may need a tweak, and that tweak could just make all the difference. So if you have a record of your symptoms and how they've been, even over the course of a month, it can be really helpful for your doctor to know what's working and what's not.
Charting our moods and activities like sleep and exercise can also encourage us to keep regular routines, which makes any changes in them a lot easier to notice. Again, that is episode 172, The Value of Tracking Our Mental Health Symptoms, which is 18 minutes long.
Next is episode 173, Depression is Not a Weakness. Imagine starting your day in a pit, and from that disadvantage, imagine battling the darkest of convincing thoughts, playing non-stop in your head, and having to convince yourself that you and your life actually do still have value. We can assure you that while it may look like giving in or laziness from the outside, it is a very different experience on the inside.
Because you cannot begin to understand what that person is going through. In fact, when I think of people who live with suicidal ideation, to think about the fact that they fight a battle every day, and sometimes the battle seems to be life itself, and to have the strength to keep fighting to live is something that should be celebrated and not something that should be condemned.
Our guest, Victor Armstrong, says we should strive to focus on each other's humanity and not what we perceive to be either weaknesses or strengths. When we treat depression as a weakness, we add to its power and danger. Again, this full 18-minute episode is number 173, Depression is not a weakness.
And our last episode of this extended season is number 174, Mental Health System in Crisis. We learned last week that even royals are impacted by stigma and discrimination when seeking help and treatment for mental health challenges and suicidal thoughts. From access, affordability, representation, discrimination, and other factors. Even when someone recognizes the need for help, they don't or can't necessarily get it. In the second of two conversations with mental health advocate Victor Armstrong, we look at the ways the mental health care system itself is in crisis.
It's difficult for people sometimes to really buy into the process because if I, for example, as a 50-something-year-old black man, were experiencing severe depression and recognizing that only about 4% of psychologists are black and only about 2% of psychiatrists are black, how willing am I going to be to go into the office of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 20-something-year-old female and sit on her couch and tell her, I don't feel like getting out of bed in the morning, I cry all the time, and my sex drive is low. So I think there are a lot of challenges as to why we don't have more acceptance of acknowledging mental health challenges and getting help.
Again, episode 174, Mental Health System in Crisis, can be heard in its entirety, along with more than 200 other episodes of this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Google, and Apple Podcast, as well as smart speakers and obviously wherever you're listening now.
If you have any comments on these episodes or ideas for new ones for season 17, which will begin in April, please go to our website, givingvoicetodepression.com, and look for the red record widget in the upper left corner. Click on that and leave us a voice message.
We'll be taking some time off to both start research and interviews for the new season and to try to find funding to continue this weekly podcast and our online support community. If you are affiliated with any foundations or organizations that fund mental health and suicide prevention efforts, please reach out and connect with us. Our guests' stories of lived experience and hope have been heard almost 500,000 times, and we really want to be able to keep bringing them to people who need to hear them. Thank you.
We truly hope that our podcast brings a little more understanding, helps you better articulate your experience of depression, or better understand how to support someone else's.
We invite you to join us for daily posts on the Giving Voice to Depression Facebook page and on Twitter and Instagram at Voice Depression. It is a comfort to be among fellow travelers on depression's dark road.
And remember, if you're struggling, speak up. If someone else is, listen up.